right, let's dive into Second Chronicles. We're going on our journey through the kings of Judah, and we've got a great guide, the study guide from Instituto Bíblico do Brasil.
It's fascinating. This book really dives into the spiritual side of leadership.
So it's more than just a list of who ruled when. It's about how their faith, or lack of it, shaped their reigns and the whole nation.
Exactly. And the author seems to want to show how the Davidic line of kings stayed strong in Judah and how much their obedience to God affected their rule.
Well, speaking of David, we can't forget his son, Solomon, the one known for his incredible wisdom and that magnificent temple he built in Jerusalem. But I've always wondered, how could a king so wise make some pretty unwise choices?
Solomon. He's one of the most interesting figures in the Bible. Blessed with wisdom, yet the book shows us his weaknesses, too.
It's more than just his many wives and riches, right?
Yeah, you're catching on. Second Chronicles seems to be saying that Solomon's focus on material things and power pulled him away from God. Remember Deuteronomy, where God warned kings against too many horses, wives, and riches?
And Solomon went for all three.
He did, and it's like the more he achieved, the further he strayed. A good reminder for us about the dangers of worldly success, right?
That's what makes you think.
And the impact of his choices was huge. His reign weakened, and things were set for the kingdom to split. Imagine the effect of a leader losing their faith. It touches everyone they lead.
It's like a ripple effect.
Huh.
And speaking of division, that's exactly what happened after Solomon died, right? Rehoboam took over in Judah, the south, and Jeroboam led the breakaway north, the kingdom of Israel.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a political split. Jeroboam, maybe to solidify his power, actually kicked the Levites out of the north.
Hold on, who are the Levites again?
The Levites were the priestly tribe. They are responsible for all the temple services. So by getting rid of them, Jeroboam basically made a whole new religious system. This probably explains why Second Chronicles focuses only on Judah.
It's like the author saying, this is where the true faith continued, the line of David, the legacy of the temple.
Right. And that sets up this fascinating contrast between kings who did well when they followed God's law and those who struggled when they went for idols. It's like a real-life test of faith and leadership playing out on a national level.
Amazing.
And the book really highlights these differences. You have righteous kings like Asa, known for strengthening Judah and making religious reforms. He even deposed his own grandmother because she worshipped idols.
Wow. Talk about commitment. But did any kings try to find a balance? Did they all fit neatly into good or bad?
Well, there's Jehoshaphat. He was known for seeking God's guidance. During his time, Judah had peace and military victories, but even he ran into trouble when he teamed up with Ahab, the king of Israel, who was known for being wicked.
So even a king who sought God's guidance could make bad decisions. It's a good reminder that we all make mistakes. But
Right.
what about those who just ignored their faith?
Oh, Jehoram's a perfect example. He married Ahab's daughter and followed Ahab's bad example. The book describes his awful death. His reign is a warning about what happens when you abandon God's ways.
One bad decision after another. It makes you think how different things could have been if he'd followed God.
Then there's Ahaz, who went even further. He shut down the temple and even practiced child sacrifice. This led Judah into a really bad time, weak and controlled by other nations.
It's hard to imagine the suffering the people went through because of their leaders' choices. But was there any hope in all this darkness?
Manasseh's story gives us some hope. He practiced sorcery and idolatry and even ended up a captive in Assyria. But he repented and experienced God's mercy. It shows us it's never too late to turn back to God. His forgiveness is always there.
Manasseh's story is really encouraging. So we have these righteous kings like Asa and Jehoshaphat, and then those who went astray like Jehoram and Ahaz. But what about how their choices affected the whole nation?
That's where we see these cycles of repentance and revival happening. Times of decline followed by times of reform, especially under kings like Asa, Hezekiah, and Josiah.
Were those reforms just about changing laws, or did they really change people's lives?
They had a real impact. Take Hezekiah. He didn't just restore the temple, he brought back the Passover celebration. That reconnected people with their faith and brought joy and unity back to the nation.
It's amazing how something like reviving a tradition can be so powerful. It makes you wonder how these kings actually went about making those reforms, what challenges they faced, and what the long-term effects were. Those reforms, they really make you think about how powerful it can be when people reconnect with their faith. But even with those moments of revival, the book doesn't shy away from, well, the fall of Jerusalem. Like it's always there in the background, reminding us that straying from God has consequences.
It's definitely a dark part of Judah's history, full of warnings that went unheeded. Prophets, like Jeremiah, they desperately tried to get the people and their leaders to turn back to God. But it seems their pleas fell on deaf ears. It makes you wonder, what makes people, even whole nations, ignore their faith like that, even when they know the consequences?
It's like the weight of all those choices, generation after generation, just became too much to bear. So, are we talking about the Babylonian invasion here? The destruction of Jerusalem?
Yes, exactly. It's a major turning point, not just for Judah, but for the whole story of the Bible. Imagine seeing your beloved city, the heart of your faith, turn to rubble.
And what about the temple, Solomon's magnificent temple, the symbol of God's presence with his people? Was it destroyed too?
Yes, the temple, once a symbol of Solomon's devotion and wisdom, was completely destroyed. It's hard to grasp the devastation and trauma of that event. They didn't just lose their city, they lost the physical representation of their covenant with God.
The book talks about Zedekiah, the last king of Judah. He was the one who ignored the prophet Jeremiah's warnings, right?
Yes, Zedekiah's story is a tragic one. He had a chance to change things, to listen to the warnings and lead his people back to God. But he chose his own way, and that led to his downfall and the destruction of the nation.
It's interesting how the book doesn't try to sugarcoat things. It shows the real consequences of disobedience, the harsh realities faced by those who disregarded God's guidance.
That's what makes Second Chronicles so powerful. It's raw and honest about faith, leadership, and the impact of our choices. It challenges us to think about our own decisions and how they affect us and those around us.
So, Jerusalem destroyed, the temple in ruins, the people exiled to Babylon. Is there any hope left at this point? It feels like the ultimate defeat.
This is where we see how strong faith can be. Even in this terrible situation, there's a glimmer of hope.
You're talking about the Persian king Cyrus's decree, right? The one that allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple.
Exactly. Cyrus's decree is a pivotal moment. It marks a shift in power, a new era for the Jewish people. But more importantly, it shows God's faithfulness to his covenant, even though his people strayed from him.
It's amazing how God used a foreign king, someone who didn't even worship the God of Israel, to make this restoration happen.
It shows us that God's ways are not our ways. He can work through anyone, even those who don't acknowledge him, to achieve his purposes.
This ending, it's both sad and hopeful. We've seen the destruction of a nation and its holy places, but also the potential for a new start, a chance to rebuild and reconnect with God.
Absolutely. The return to Jerusalem and rebuilding the temple represent a fresh start, a chance to learn from past mistakes and build a stronger foundation of faith. It's a powerful message of hope, even in the darkest times.
Second Chronicles takes us on such a journey, from Solomon's glory and the kingdom's division to the rise and fall of kings, the destruction of Jerusalem, and finally that glimmer of hope with the return from exile.
It really is a powerful story about faith, the impact of our choices, and God's unwavering faithfulness, even when we stumble. But there's so much more to uncover. Second Chronicles is full of interesting details and hidden gems that give us even deeper insights.
It's like uncovering hidden treasures. So what are some of these details, these treasures that we can find in Second Chronicles?
You know, one thing that really grabs you in Second Chronicles is the little details. It's not just a big overview. It's like the author zoomed in, giving us these fascinating glimpses into the lives of the kings, the ups and downs of their reigns.
Oh, I love that. So give me an example. What kind of details? I'm ready for those hidden treasures.
Okay, take Solomon. The book doesn't just say he was wise. It describes his wealth, the sheer scale of what went into building the temple. Cedars from Lebanon, gold from Ophir, skilled workers from Tyre. It's like we're right there watching this grand project unfold.
It's like being transported back in time. Instead of just reading about it, you're experiencing ancient Jerusalem.
Exactly. And these details often tell us something deeper about the characters, about the book's message.
So they're like clues, helping us unlock a richer understanding, a literary scavenger hunt.
You got it. For instance, the book mentions Solomon getting all these horses and chariots, and it even says he got them from Egypt. A small detail, maybe.
But wait, wasn't that something God warned kings against in Deuteronomy? It's not just a random detail, is it?
You're sharp. It subtly shows Solomon relying more and more on foreign powers, drifting away from God's commands. These little details can be powerful, showing us the inner struggles these kings faced.
It's like we're peeking behind the curtain, seeing the human side of these larger-than-life figures. What other hidden gems can we find?
Well, when Solomon dedicated the temple, the book describes a huge sacrifice, like 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep.
Whoa, that's a lot of animals. What's the meaning behind a sacrifice that big?
It might seem like just a number, but it shows how important this event was. It emphasizes their deep desire to honor God in a truly grand, awe-inspiring way.
Like they were trying to show the depth of their devotion in a way words couldn't express. And I bet there are more of these details that give us a deeper understanding of the events in Second Chronicles.
Oh, absolutely. Remember King Asa, the one who removed his own grandmother from power because of her idolatry?
Yes, a bold move. He was serious about his faith.
Well, here's something interesting. The book calls her Asa's mother, but if you look at the genealogy, she was actually his grandmother.
Did the author get it wrong then?
Not really. In ancient Hebrew culture, father and mother could refer to ancestors in general. So she was his grandmother, but also considered a mother in a broader sense.
He reminds us that we need to understand the cultural context. We can't just impose our modern interpretations.
Right. And this detail about Asa's mother actually tells us something about power back then.
Really? How so?
It suggests that even older generations, those not directly ruling, could still have a lot of influence, and it highlights Asa's courage to challenge even his own family to protect true worship in Judah.
It makes you think about how power works, even within families. Those little details open a window into the culture and social structures of ancient Judah.
Exactly. They add so much to our understanding of their world.
Wow, I'm seeing Second Chronicles in a whole new way. It's more than just stories, it's like a tapestry, full of intricate details that teach us about faith, leadership, and the nature of God.
That's the amazing thing about diving into these ancient texts. There's always more to discover, more layers of meaning to uncover. And as we explore, we not only learn about the past, but we find lessons for our own lives today.
So if you want a journey that'll make you think about faith, power, and God's covenant, explore Second Chronicles. You might be surprised at what you find.
And remember, pay attention to those hidden gems. The small details might unlock a deeper understanding of this fascinating and timeless book.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, happy exploring.